In other news, California is ordering its nearly 40 million residents to stay home until further notice to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. This order marks the first statewide mandatory restrictions issued in the US to help combat the outbreak. 19 people have died and more than 900 have tested positive for COVID-19 in California. I spoke to our US Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh earlier today to find out more about the latest developments stateside. Nirmal, President Donald Trump continually calls COVID-19 the Chinese virus. Are relations between the US and China at breaking point?
I think one would have to say yes to that. This rift is not going to be over anytime soon and has deepened mutual suspicion as each country tries to shift blame. We have a deepening argument. We have allegations flying back and forth, and President Trump has doubled down on calling it the Chinese virus. This works well with his base as it changes the narrative. It deflects blame from his own administration, which, while it reacted very quickly at first, then sort of let things drift and is now facing a massive crisis and loss of confidence. Meanwhile, of course, over in China, the CCP, the Communist Party, clearly knows that domestic anger about its initial suppression of the emergence of this virus undermines the regime's legitimacy, and so it is now going all out, directing domestic discontent towards the United States. It suits both countries to cover up their failings by blaming each other, and when you set that in the context of the pretty robust strategic competition we have now, one would have to say this is a very low point.
Now, earlier this week, Beijing demanded that 13 American journalists working for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal and Washington Post hand back their press cards within 10 days, effectively expelling them. How has the US responded?
Well, the US has condemned it, of course, and just yesterday a senior State Department official was briefing journalists and he said, look, we want reciprocity. The Chinese say this is reciprocal in return for the US designating several Chinese media agencies as government entities and capping the number of Chinese employees they can have out here. So the US says these are government entities, while those American media organizations are not. So how is this possibly reciprocal? Besides, foreign journalists and in fact diplomats as well operate under a restrictive environment in China, which is not the case in the US. So again, where is the reciprocity? So the two are at totally cross purposes, and it is hard to see this ending or being resolved in a hurry, and it fuels the bad blood between the two countries.
Nirmal, despite the US government saying Americans should avoid groups of more than 10 people, videos of spring break revelry have surfaced. Do you foresee stricter social distancing measures?
It is possible. There has been a steady tightening that we have seen, but it is a mix of orders, like for restaurants and bars to offer only takeout or delivery, and advisories. States can interpret or issue their own guidelines. But as the number of cases rises and public anxiety spreads, there will be an incentive to order stricter measures because local politicians will have to respond to concerns. Right now, it is a tightrope, of course. Do you order harsh social distancing or shelter in place, which means stay at home, which is crashing the economy, or do you leave some leeway which allows some economic activity to take place against the risk of the health system becoming overwhelmed and many more people dying, and that will anyway crash the economy?
Many European countries are in lockdown. Our neighbour across the causeway, of course, has enforced a 2-week movement control order as well. What about the US? How feasible is it?
Right, so we've seen countries in Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia making these kinds of choices. But then there's also the question of culture. Apart from the fact that humans are, of course, naturally gregarious, America in particular is a very diverse society and a freewheeling kind of individualistic society. There is an inbuilt resistance to government trying to make people do things. But yes, as the numbers go up, and they will, public opinion may be more receptive across the country to stronger measures. And if it reaches that stage, I don't think you can expect it to be as watertight as, say, in Wuhan, but one can only hope it will be effective enough. There is considerable public anxiety and awareness, but the messages have been a little bit mixed. For example, you have had prominent conservative TV hosts with millions of followers until very recently downplaying the virus. So the response at the population level has been a bit patchy. There's a lot more that can be done, and we can watch New York City in that regard in the coming days.
Thank you, Nirmal, for your insights.
Thank you.
That was US Bureau Chief Nirmal Ghosh on the situation in the US. As the US potentially considers a lockdown and tethers on the brink of a recession, Nirmal checked in with Danny Kwa, Dean and Lee Ka-shing Professor in Economics at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, to find out his thoughts. Here's an excerpt of the interview from this week's episode of Asian Insider.
Dr. Kwa, a last question for you before we wrap up. What is the view of the U.S. out there about the way the U.S. is handling this and the potential ramifications in terms of the impact of a very, very sharp recession in the U.S., sharp and sudden recession?
There are quite a number of observers in Asia who are looking on at how the Trump administration has been handling this crisis with considerable horror. Many places in Asia have worked very hard at containment, at detection, and have been able to bring down dramatically the infection rate in our societies. Wuhan itself, which was running several thousand new cases a day at the height in January and February, yesterday reported 0 new cases. There are strategies that work. There are containment strategies that work. And many in Asia who've acknowledged the dangers and risk have taken on exactly these strategies. But right now, we're confronted with a whole rest of the world, and we're worrying about now importing cases of COVID-19. So when we see the Trump administration switching 180 degrees in the space of a week between, on the one extreme, Donald Trump suggesting that all of this is just a hoax, to the realization that we're going to be seeing massive fatalities across different parts of the world, it is sobering and it is frightening, because the world needs to come together. Our traditional leadership in the global economy that has been able to deal with these kinds of emergencies seem to have left the building. And so we're looking on in horror. The level of technical expertise in the United States, in the United Kingdom, is so considerable. The wisdom that's been built up on how to deal with pandemics is so deep, but a lot of that seems to be being ignored by Western political leaders, by America's political leaders. So we're looking on with some worry.